last of a dying race, the alien who walked among us, the God who became a man, the champion of all things good over evil. These are legends that have lasted thousands of years, passed down from generations. These myths are the fabric of our past, present, and future. Today, we find the greatest hero of all. He stands for truth, justice, and the American way. The preeminent superhero of all, Superman.
Storytelling hasn't changed an awful lot since we were gathered around the fire at night. No matter what we do as people, there are challenges that are beyond us, beyond our knowledge, beyond our imagination, and that becomes the source of mythology, the source of religion, and the source of much of story.
Every country has its mythology. Every person has its mythology. It's the story of how things begin. In Greece, you have a hero like Odysseus, considered the wildest, the wiliest, bravest hero of antiquity. He embodies a certain time in Homeric Greece, but he also embodies all of classical history.
Mankind has always had legends of powerful heroes. You've got the Greek myths of Perseus and Theseus and all these great heroic characters. All these characters were, in their way, superheroes.
If you go really deep into the history of the superhero figure, you're looking at the likes of the demigod. I mean, Hercules is a pretty good instance of what a superhero should be. You have the abilities beyond ordinary mortals, and the labors of Hercules, the series of tasks that our hero has to overcome.
In just about every mythology in the world, there are stories of gods walking amongst us, you know, and wanting to be one of us. The story of Christ is God walking as an ordinary man and trying to help people.
When you look at the mythological gods, even when we tell them in the comics themselves, they are very selfish. And they're more morality lessons or morality plays than they are inspirational stories.
The incarnations of these characters way back in early mythology reflected what they thought about human beings. Obviously, they had, in some ways, a darker view of people than we did. They didn't have the notion that God necessarily had to be on our side as much.
The definition of heroic has changed over the centuries. I define it as a power in service to others. Well, it used to be the hero was just a person especially blessed by the gods who stood above others and accomplished great things.
Heroes being an ideal model of behavior, embodying strength, beauty, ethics, moral courage, and so on, but also in the sense that the hero is a personification of an entire culture.
What do we have as Americans? We have a kind of grab bag of different kinds of figures. You know, we have some presidents like Washington and Lincoln. We have some frontiersmen. We have some pioneers like Daniel Boone.
All through the ages, we've had these superheroic type figures, the dime novel versions of the Wild West characters. But superheroes were the 20th century's attempt to, come up with a version of this.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound.
As far as I know, the word superhero wasn't even coined until the late 30s, early 40s. To describe this phenomenon that was coming up in comic strips.
Superman is created by a writer named Jerry Siegel, an artist named Joe Shuster, and essentially, to me, they're almost like their imaginations were like some kind of cauldron bubbling over with everything. They love mythology. They love the idea of voyages to other planets, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon.
Mythologies are always stories about how something comes to be. And Siegel and Shuster were very hip to this old mythology, and it's quite something how they put Superman into a little capsule, and they floated him down the river of space, so to speak, like Moses.
Put in a boat, goes somewhere else. He is adopted by someone, not his biological parents, and achieves great fame in that second place.
Superman is the modern-day Moses. In terms of the power of that idea, I think that's where it comes from, and I think that's one of the things that people connect with. You hear these Bible stories as a kid, and then you say, okay, Siegel and Shuster started a modern mythological character, and this is a very powerful story.
There are certain elements, you know, that are definitely there. The hero has to have lost his parents, be alienated from his parents, be adopted, be orphaned in some way. That is, the hero has to be unconditioned. He comes out of nowhere to a certain extent. I mean, that's really important because he has to define himself in growing up. I mean, I think those kinds of images are put in there to increase the mythic resonance of the story.
The fact that Superman caught on so fast and created a genre so fast, it just was a manifestation of what people needed at the time. They needed hope, and even though they were drawings on paper, they gave a lot of hope to a lot of people.
Superman comes into the world in the 1930s. There are an enormous amount of associations around him. Some Christian groups immediately saw a counterpart to the Jesus story. They immediately saw the world being redeemed from the outside.
All these years, as happy as we've been, how I've prayed and prayed the good Lord to see fit to give us a child.
Others with a more philosophical bent heard echoes of the period in which Nietzsche and many of the European philosophers announced that God is dead, the Christian Judeo version of God. Well, why don't we give you a superhero to fill in the gap?
Many of the superheroes are sort of secular counterparts of religious redeemers. They are the people that you turn to when you have no hope. They're the ones with larger-than-life powers who can save you.
We have been raised in this Judeo-Christian mythology that we will be redeemed from a place far, far away. The role of the mentor in mythology is one of the most intriguing. The word itself comes from Homer, the original Odyssey. When Odysseus goes off to war, knowing he could be gone 10 or 20 years, and that he's just become a father, he has a baby boy, he turns to his best friend, whose name is Mentor, and says, I'm going to be gone a long, long time. Would you please watch over the safety, the welfare of my boy?
Superman, Kal-El from Krypton, has been raised by Ma and Pa Kent. So the proof of nurture over nature, isn't it? Yeah, the idea that he is Clark Kent because those are the values he learned back in Smallville, the archetypal small town.
Our heritage is that the mentor helps you make up your own mind, points you in the right direction and says, now you've got to take the journey, the hero journey, yourself.
He was brought up with the American values that are inherent in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Gettysburg Address, that we're all equal. Superman doesn't think of himself as better than anyone. He's more capable. You know, he's stronger, he's faster, but that just makes him more capable. He doesn't think of himself as better than us. Otherwise, he would be our king.
There are a couple of lines, if I recall correctly, in the early comic books and also in the film, where Mr. Kent tells him that he shouldn't show off. He has to know how to use his powers correctly.
Yeah, I know. You can do all these amazing things, and sometimes you think that you will just go bust unless you can tell people about it, huh?
Yeah.
And there's one thing I do know, son, and that is you are here for a reason.
And this is subtly done, but it's exactly the message that the mentor has given throughout the hero stories, because the hero's powers can destroy people.
And here's the latest about the most glamorous figure that's ever flashed across the news horizon. Yes, you guessed it, Superman.
Superman, like Captain America, is sort of special in that he is so closely identified with patriotic themes.
There is a resonance in Superman to the fundamental American dream. You have someone who comes here from elsewhere who chooses to take their gifts and use them to make the world a better place.
This costume ties into the immigrant story again because it's based on an artifact that was found in his rocket when he landed. And so when he's being his true self, when he's being Superman, he is proudly displaying that he is a Kryptonian.
Kal-El, Clark Kent, aspires to be like us. He wants to feel a unity with us. And that creates a real inner complexity because he also wants to be who he most essentially is, that Kryptonian, and yet he's pulled in two directions. You have this dual nature here.
There is two aspects of every human being. We show one part of our face to the world, and there's another part of us that's undeveloped.
Batman is the person who disguises his real identity with a mask, and Superman is the person who takes off his fake identity to become Superman. That is, his normal identity is not him.
Ken, can you open this?
Oh, sure, Mr. White.
This could be the base.
The Clark Kent character, that's the one he made up. He made him a little bit more bumbling. He made him shorter by crouching over. He talks differently, a little bit higher pitched than Superman.
Excuse me, sir. I think you're sitting in my favorite seat.
Oh, come and get it for us.
That sense that I am bigger, I am stronger, I'm more interesting than I look to you right now, I think is a kind of interesting fantasy. I mean, Superman is the one hero who, in fact, says, my normality is itself a mask.
The dual identity is a very successful formula because Bruce Wayne is Batman, Peter Parker is Spider-Man, Bruce Banner is the Hulk, etc. I think eventually hundreds, if not thousands, of superheroes adopted the dual identity convention.
He's truly an inspirational hero, and he's an icon from which not only mankind looks up to, but the other heroes. In my opinion, is that he's always been the first, he's always been the foremost hero of the bunch, and therefore he's the character that everybody aspires to be.
Fine.
Superman?
That's me.
As the world grew, Superman's powers sort of grew to keep up with it, to keep ahead of the curve, to the point where in the 60s, he was invulnerable enough to withstand atomic explosions. And he could, fly to other stars under his own power and come back in our lifetime, usually by Tuesday.
He sort of does it all. Super strength, X-ray vision, telescopic vision, heat vision, super breath. He could fly, he's invulnerable. He's everything, which makes it very difficult to write sometimes, but when you understand what he is, makes it a lot of fun as well.
I mean, that's why they invented kryptonite, because they had to give him some vulnerability.
Kryptonite. From the planet Krypton, where Superman was born. The only bullet he could feel contained elements of kryptonite.
It's always the vulnerability that allows you to come in and finally identify with the hero. The classic phrase that's come down to us is the Achilles heel. That's that little point of weakness in the hero that makes him vulnerable and possibly destructible.
As the powers grew in a figure like Superman, you need a more worthy adversary.
Police believe that Luthor, the renegade scientist, is at work again.
You mean Superman's archenemy?
Yes, but I still think Superman scared him away.
You have, Jesus versus Satan. You have Holmes versus Moriarty. You have, James Bond versus Blofeld. Everyone has their opposite number.
All right, Luthor. Where is it? Where's the detonator?
Lex Luthor, of course, is his big arch nemesis, and he was originally kind of this mad scientist.
Keep the men at work until the spaceship is ready to take off. Then, from the ionosphere, we shall beat our enemies into submission.
The man of, super intellect, giving problems to the superhuman, super powerful being.
And Lex Luthor represents ultimate corruption, because he owns the world, he owns big business. He can buy you, he can destroy you, he can have you killed.
Remember my motto, the more fear you make, the more loot you take.
He's power, and power that even Superman can't break through.
The supervillains have got to exploit the weaknesses of the heroes. That makes an even greater hero. And I always say the greater the villain, the greater the hero, without a doubt.
And every culture has to have some kind of hero figure to slay that dragon. I think that's why Superman